welcome to It Matters, the most important show on the radio right now. On tonight's show, we'll be talking about how we think. More to the point, we're going to be talking about how our brains can create worlds with just a little bit of information. Worlds so vivid that they rival the real thing. Then we'll listen to an example to see just how far our minds can take us. So go on a journey with me tonight as we see what matters today in our world. All right. So our brains are amazing things. They can process information faster than a computer. With only just a bit of data, these powerful biological machines can determine the most difficult answers. With just a little bit of information, a little bit of data that we capture with our senses, whether it's our eyes, our ears, touch, taste, all those senses, just that little bit of information, and we can determine very specific things. That's just how we're wired, how our brains are made. Well, how does this work? Tonight, we're going to take a look at one of these aspects of our brains. We're going to take a look at how we process media. And now, when I say media, I'm not talking about news media or anything like that. I'm talking about the physical media itself, whether it's listening to me on the radio, or whether it's watching a television program, watching something at the cinema, reading a book, reading a newspaper. Media, the actual medium of transmissions of communication. We're going to look and see how our brains function and how they interpret that. Now, whether we are reading a book or watching a movie or listening to the radio, our brains have to work to fill in the information that isn't included. Now, there's two basic modes in which our brains operate. There's passive and there's active. So what does that mean? Well, let's take a look at the passive idea of what happens when our brain ingests media in a passive manner. So passive mental involvement, what that means is it involves both sight and sound. So like when we're watching TV or a movie at the cinema, or when we're watching a play or something happen in our everyday world, we both hear the characters or people or actions. We both hear them, the sounds that make up the background. We hear that. We can hear music, but we also see. We see the characters moving. We see the trees flowing in the wind. We can see cars driving past. Well, this synchronicity or matching of the visual image with the sound image, you basically taking those two senses and putting them together. Our brain really just doesn't require a lot of extra processing to put those together. We're being given so much information that our brain does not have to work very hard. We see the elements, we hear the elements, and it puts it together in a complete picture. It's given all these elements and connect them without having to fill in any gaps because we are providing the sensory information. Now, studies will tell you that we're clearly not capturing everything that's out there because we just don't have the capacity to do that. And our brains actually do fill in the gaps. But I'm talking in a general sense here. If you want to go specific, sure, when you scan a room, do you really see everything, or are we just seeing parts of everything and our brain fills in the gaps? Well, studies show our brains and eyes can only process information about 1/24 of a second. So every 1/24 of a second, we're basically taking a picture with our eyes and brains, and they get knit together in our heads. Well, that's not exactly what I'm talking about, although that does come into play, the speed of which we transfer data from our eyes to our brains. But what I'm talking about specifically is when you have two senses acting together. Then your brain doesn't have to work as hard to make a coherent image. However, if you think about it and you're watching the same TV show, the same movie, the same outdoor event, and you shut off one of those senses. So let's say you're watching a movie and the sound goes out. Well, you have the visual of what is going on, but you no longer have the auditory sense coming in, so you can't have any idea what they're saying. Now, sure, through their motions, through the lips, if you can read lips, you're going to be able to pick up on some things. But our brain is left to fill in those gaps with ideas. So that is active mental involvement. Active mental involvement involves only one of the senses. So, for example, when we're reading a book, we only have the words on the page. Yet, using that information, just the words, our brains can conjure these vast landscapes or endless reaches of cold, black space. I mean, we can see the characters that are in the book take shape before us as they're described in the book, and we can experience that environment through them. And it's the same when you're listening to audio, listening to me tonight, listening to books on tape, audio plays. The only data our brain is getting is just the sound. Yet that, even now, so most of you who are listening right now have never seen me. You have no idea what I look like, yet you probably have an image in your head of what you think I look like based upon the vocal cues that I give you just by talking. So our brains are relational. You hear something and you are able to conjure a picture in your head based upon what you hear. Well, this is what we're going to be talking about tonight. We're going to be talking about, I like to call it anyway, theater of the mind. Our brain's ability to take sound. Since we're on the radio, that's going to be the easiest thing to do, to take sound and transform it into vivid and detailed pictures. It can take some work sometimes, I'll tell you. It's not easy for everyone, and not everyone gets it. It's like those dot pictures. Remember when we were younger, they made these pictures that were just composed of dots. And if you stared at a certain dot a certain way by crossing your eyes a certain way and standing on your left foot for 30 seconds, whatever the traditional ritual was, then a sailboat in 3D would appear on the sheet. You know what? I was never able to see those. That's kind of what's happening in our brains when we have this active mental participation going on. When you hear something, your brain puts together those pieces and allows you to put that image together. So what I want you to do is we're going to try an experiment. And I would like you to close your eyes. So just go with me on this. Unless you're driving right now, just close your eyes and listen to my voice. Then allow your mind to imagine what I described to you. All right? Here we go. Close your eyes. The day was dark, darker than I had ever seen before. I could see in the western sky that the sun was shining, but the gloom that filled the air was so thick. The sun was only a distant lamp that cast its light a few yards before the encroaching darkness forced it into oblivion. I walked forward, noticing that even in the unnatural dimness, the air was warm. Warmer than it should be. It was an odd warmness, not like that of a summer day at the beach or a cozy January evening at home in front of the fire. No, this was warm like travelers headed to hell would feel when they are close enough to see the smoke but not yet the flames. That is the heat of today. Okay, now open your eyes. What did you feel? What images were conjured? Could you see the sun's ebbing light through the mist? Could you feel the heat coming off? And what about the things I didn't describe? Could you see the rest of the world around you? Where? Think about this now. That passage I just read was something I wrote earlier today, but think about this. Where did it take place? Who knows? Each of us may have a different answer. Our brains may try to find that based upon previous experiences we've had. The baggage we carry in our brains help us determine how we interpret things. So think about that. Where did this take place? Was it a battlefield just after a war? Or was it possibly a supernatural alien world that was just newly discovered? That's possible too. I mean, anything is so wonderful. That's what is so great about our brain's ability to create worlds with just words. Those words I just gave you, honestly, I could give them to you tomorrow, and you may see a completely different image. A lot of how our brains process information is not only based upon our previous experiences, but also our moods and how we feel right now. It's all subjective. Now, if I had given you very specific details, then it may have been a little bit easier to not go off track, but everyone have more of a specific example. So let's try that. Go ahead, close your eyes again. When I woke up this morning, I reached over and turned off the alarm clock and saw that it was still 2:30. Why did my alarm go off so early? It was still dark outside. The pitch blackness streamed through the windows. The white blinds that normally reflect the sun now seemed to just be lost in the darkness. The cat purred around my feet as I stood, and he thought he was going to be fed, but little did he know there was no food to be had in the house. I walked through the seemingly alien environment. I'd never seen the house this dark. The soft carpet brushed against my feet, and I felt the fibers between my toes, and it almost reminded me of sand on the beaches of spring break, those many years ago. But that was a long time. Decades have passed since my thoughts had drifted there. Myself, though, I can go on. Okay, so open your eyes. A little more detail, a little different tone with the quality of the voice. So if you can see what I'm talking about, it's a visceral experience almost, that our ears hear something and our brains try to interpret it as something that makes sense to us, that we can comprehend, that fits our view of how things are supposed to be. So let's talk a little bit about how this idea came to pass. Now, radio has always been, of course, an audio medium ever since its inception. Even as early as the late 1800s, there was actually radio dramas, and I'll get into that in just a second. So this medium of radio has actually been playing with this idea of theater of the mind for over a century. They've been creating this phenomenon and thrilling audiences across much of the world. And the way they did this, it actually started as a uniquely American phenomenon. Although, to be honest, the whole thing actually started in France in 1881. A French engineer applied for a patent on a device called a théâtrophone, which basically allowed theater companies to send the sound of their performances over telephone lines. Theater phone, obviously, is the American translation. And this was wildly successful. They would put coin-operated listening boxes in hotel rooms hotel lobbies. You could even have one installed in your phone. And you could either pay, like 5 cents for a minute, or you could subscribe, which you would get a cheaper rate at that. But you could listen, if you chose, to full-on plays from New York or operas anything that they wanted to play over these airwaves, you could listen to. And this was wildly popular. People listened to these plays in their homes from 1881, and I think the last broadcast, if you can call it that, of the Theatrophone went up until the 1930s. So this was a long-lived thing, about 50 years this was going on. Now, the American part of this hit in 1922 in Schenectady, New York. So what had happened was there was a station, and they had a group of people that wanted to do plays, and they wanted to put them over the radio to be able to give people who don't live in the city an opportunity to experience theater. So they began to broadcast audio of full-length stage plays, complete with music and sound effects and a company of actors. And this took off like crazy. They began having stations pop up all across the United States. They were doing this type of work, and overseas as well. Eventually, it all got consolidated into, there was 4 main stations that we know today. There was ABC, NBC, CBS, and then there was a fourth generic, non-affiliated broadcaster that had a handful of stations but didn't have a ton. But ABC, CBS, and NBC, those were the 3 main ones that had these radio dramas, as they called them, serial. They had all kinds of things. Now, the majority of what we call radio drama today came about from the late 1920s and lasted into the mid-1950s or so, which is collectively known as the golden age of radio. In fact, so many people in America listened to these programs, listened to the radio. In 1947, there was a survey done, and 82% of Americans routinely listened to radio programming. And the radio programming back then was completely different than the radio programming now. Now, this station that we're on here, KTGO, is a little bit different. We here do not necessarily have a lot of advertisements. We don't necessarily have, all the commercial stuff that you would find on a regular commercial station. But we do have, some spots that we play back and forth. Well, back then, what they did was that every show had a sponsor. And I'll show you an example of this here in a little bit. But that's how they paid the bills. They didn't have commercials per se where they would break away and go to a commercial. Their commercials were integrated into the shows themselves. There was a lot of different styles of shows that came on back then. There was comedies and dramas and tragedies. All of these were produced. Everything from Sherlock Holmes, The Shadow, Dick Tracy, Little Orphan Annie, and Shakespeare even. And then there were comedies, comedians Jack Benny, Laurel and Hardy, Abbott and Costello, George and Gracie Allen, Fibber McGee and Molly, Groucho Marx. They all had their own shows. It just thrilled audiences. A lot of famous stars that we think of as famous today from that era got their start in radio. Well, actually, they got their start in vaudeville and then moved to radio as it became popular. The process for creating these shows was actually quite extraordinary. Everything was done live. Nothing was pre-recorded. Today, we have the luxury when you listen to a book on tape or something like that, it's all pre-recorded. It's edited. It's not have to done live. Back then, what would happen is they would write the script. A lot of shows were weekly. Some shows were daily, which I can't even imagine. But most shows were weekly. They would write the show throughout the week. And then the day of the show, they would show up at the studio without ever having to read. The actors hadn't read the pages yet. The orchestra had been rehearsing, but the actors, the sound man, the sound effects guy, all those had never read the script. They would stand up or sit down, depending on the studio, and then they would run through it. And then, within like 30 to 60 minutes, they would actually be live on air doing that show. So it was a really, really fast turnaround, really, really fast way to do things. They had live sound effects guys. So there was a guy that had a table. Anytime a sound effect was needed, he would play that live. For a gunshot, he had a cap gun. If there was a door closing, he had a door on a hinge that squeaked and would close. If you needed footsteps, he would actually have a table with gravel or cement or whatever on it and shoes and walk it with his hands. Everything was done in the studio live, and most of them, at least the comedies, were done before a studio audience. What I want to do now is I want to play you a clip from one of these shows. So this is a show that was on. It was called The Bickersons, and Don Amici, who you may or may not know, Don Amici, he did a lot of film, TV, radio, vaudeville. He did it all. You may recognize his voice when we get into it. But this is just a short clip from the show The Bickersons, just to give you an idea of what a comedy was like. And I'd like you to listen to what's being said and see if you notice anything about what's going on. This is The Bickersons.
The Bickersons have retired. Mrs. Bickerson lies tense and awake in the darkness as poor husband John, victim of a rare type of insomnia which keeps the patient in a complete lethargy for 8 hours at a time, offers valid proof of his agonizing affliction. Listen.
This has been going on since 9 o'clock. Oh, please, not that again. John, quit it.
Quit it, Blanche.
John, there must be something that'll put a stop to that hideous snoring. Why do you do it?
Do what, Blanche?
Snore. Snore.
Okay.
John, I'm going out of my mind. For years, you've been telling people you've got insomnia. And you not only sleep like a log, but you sound like you're sawing it.
Very funny.
It isn't funny, it's tragic. There's the clock again, 2 o'clock. I've counted that thing chime 45 times since we went to bed, and I still haven't slept.
Well, how do you expect to sleep if you're going to lie there counting chimes? Throw the darn clock out. It's keeping me awake, too.
You wouldn't wake up if we had Big Ben in the room.
Big Ben who?
I'm a nervous wreck. I've got crow's feet around my eyes. My forehead's all wrinkled. My chin is sagging.
Yeah.
I'm beginning to look like an old hag. It's true, isn't it?
I wouldn't say that.
Why not, John?
I'll be awake for the rest of the night.
You do think it's true, though, don't you?
What's true?
I'm beginning to look like an old hag.
You are not beginning to look like an old hag.
Why do you emphasize beginning?
All right. You're not beginning to look like an old hag.
That sounds even worse.
Well, how do you want me to say it?
Say I look beautiful.
Okay, I look beautiful. Good night.
Oh, I don't know how a man could be so cruel. Is it any wonder I'm getting old before my time?
What time is it?
Okay, so you can get an idea there of what these shows were like. And I think these are absolutely hysterical. I love listening to these old shows. One of my favorites is Fibber McGee and Molly. I just love Jim and Marion Jordan and the rapport that they had. George and Gracie Allen were the same way. Abbott and Costello, they all had this great comedic rapport with each other. All right, so we heard her mess up her lines there once. Which, you know, when you're live, what can you do? But this was just voices, right? We didn't hear any of the music, the background sound effects, anything like that. But we can still gather that information from their voices. We can hear information about time of day, location. We hear all that, even through the running gags. And then, of course, the laughter of the audience provides a great cue for us to know it is okay to laugh at these two bickering. All right, so I'm going to play another short clip from you. This is from a Sherlock Holmes, and it has a different thing. You can actually hear music and sound effects now. I'm just going to play a short clip of this.
Holmes, it's 3 o'clock in the morning.
It is indeed, Watson.
How long are we going to crouch in the darkness of this room, waiting for what?
Watson, observe. The ventilator.
Jove, there's a gleam of light coming through.
Yes, our long vigil is over. That light can have only one meaning, my dear Watson. In a moment, we shall close in our final encounter with death itself.
We're at the door of Dr. John Watson's study, and we're about to hear another of his adventures with the fabulous Sherlock Holmes.
Well, good evening, Mr. Harris.
Good evening, Dr. Watson. What memoir are you working on tonight, sir?
A very singular adventure, Mr. Harris. A very singular adventure indeed. In glancing over my notes of the 70-odd cases I have already inscribed in my notebook, I can see none stranger than that which befell the family of the Roylotts of Stoke Moran in Surrey.
And the name of this adventure, Doctor?
Holmes and I always called it The Adventure of the Speckled Band.
All right, so there we get an idea of what those Sherlock Holmes shows sound like. And you can hear the difference. They started to employ music and sound effects. You could hear the footsteps as he walked up to Dr. Watson's door. You could hear the door open and close behind him. All right, so I have another clip that I'd like you to listen to, and this is actually, I'm going to play a full radio show for you here. I was actually lucky enough to be involved in the creation of this next piece. It's called The Art of Pickman, and it's a story that I actually adapted along with a guy named Sean Roney from an H.P. Lovecraft story called Pickman's Model. It was directed by Sean Roney. I play the character Thurber, and I'm joined by Derek Sellens as Pickman, and this also features the voices of Cam Jakes, Muriel Green, Matt Hovert, and a few others. I did the sound design and mixing on it. Cam Jakes did the editing on it. But I want you to listen to this and let your mind use the cues that we've been talking about to build that world, to listen to what's going on in this drama. This is The Art of Pickman.
Thank God you're here, Elliot. What? Yes, I know I'm more nervous than when you saw me last. There's plenty of reason, believe me. Yes, it has to do with Pickman. No, I can't remember when I spoke with him last. Why the third degree? You weren't always so inquisitive. I'm sorry. I shouldn't be short with you. Maybe you ought to know what happened. Here, let me pour some tea and I'll tell you. Boston never had a greater painter than Richard Upton Pickman. I sensed there was something different about his work. I sensed it the first time he tried to sell his paintings through Boston Art Club. That's why I took him on as a client. Well, hello, Mr. Pickman.
Hello, Mr. Thurber. Forgive me for not knocking. Your secretary told me to walk right in.
Quite all right. Good to see you again, sir.
Likewise.
Are you a tea drinker, Mr. Pickman?
Sure.
I was just about to have a cup of Portsmouth. Care to join me?
I'd love to.
Cream?
Please.
Sugar?
2, please. So, you really think you can sell my work, Mr. Thurber?
I do. I absolutely do. You tap into the surreal, the gothic, the otherworldly, like few painters I've ever seen. Any magazine cover hack could throw paint around and call it nightmarish or portrait of the devil. But it's the great ones who could make such a thing that really scare or ring true. There's something the great ones catch beyond life. Doré had it, Semay had it, Angarola of Chicago had it, and you, sir, have it.
Why, thank you, Thurber.
Did you bring the sketches like I asked?
I did.
Oh, brilliant. Such detail. And the images, my God, where do you get images and visions like this?
Wouldn't you like to know?
In hindsight, Elliot, I should have taken that nasty laugh as a bad sign. But I took him on. You remember that painting of his called Ghoul Feeding? A tremendous achievement, but the club wouldn't exhibit it. The Museum of Fine Arts wouldn't accept it as a gift. And of course, no one would buy it. Nevertheless, my admiration for him grew. I started calling on him often. We never met at his studio. He had a strange insistence on this. We met at the art club in a private suite. He would bring his drawings and paintings. If any member of the art club had seen him, we would have been kicked out for sure. Yes, Elliot, they were that macabre. Over time, he got confidential with me. Finally, one night, he opened up in a way I never thought he would. And in a way, I wish he hadn't.
So, Thurber, did you read that essay I gave you about the whole Skull and Bones, the Elder Things, and the Area 51 conspiracy?
Yes.
And?
And I think, my friend, that the fellow who wrote it is either A, some Harvard fellow with too much time on his hands, or B, someone who should be committed to Arkham Sanitarium. Maybe both.
Well, I believe it. Are you saying that I should be committed?
No, not at all. It's just a bit far-fetched for me, I guess.
Well, thank you for reading it anyway. And thank you for the time you've spent with me.
My pleasure.
Not every agent would listen to me chatter on for hours about art and philosophy like you do.
Well, you're not only my client, you're my friend, too.
Well, thank you.
A toast to friendship. More wine?
Of course. The day you agreed to take me on, you asked me where I get my visions from. Remember that?
Sure.
Do you still want to know?
Where does all that brilliance come from?
I think that you would get a better idea from it if you were to see my studio. It's in my home.
What? Are you saying you want to take me back?
People are having less and less to do with me, Thurber. The so-called art critics, patrons, exhibitors, no one cares about my work anymore. Except maybe you. And it gets lonely in that old big house. Besides, I feel that I can be confidential with you.
Confidential?
There are things in my house, on my street, in my neighborhood that, well, you'll see when you get there.
What? Are you saying those figures in all your paintings and drawings are real? That there's ghouls and whatnots?
And what if I said yes?
Then I'd say you're the fellow who should be committed to Arkham.
Then why don't you come see for yourself if you don't believe me?
I'm probably mad for asking this, but when would you like to take me there, Pickman?
Well, tonight. We'll leave the bar right now.
Why not? It's not as if I've got anything else to do. The art world is having about as much to do with me as it is with you since I took you on. But know this, Pickman.
What?
If you've rigged up your studio into some sort of haunted house for some elaborate practical joke, I've seen it all. So there's nothing you can do that will scare me.
Fair enough. Let's go.
We walked to Copley Station for the Underground and boarded the train there. As we rode, Pickman sat staring out the window at the blackness. He only spoke to me once while we were underground, but his lips never stopped moving. It was as if he were in a trance. He spoke to himself in small, airy whispers. I only got bits and pieces of what he was saying, but I didn't recognize the language. He snapped out of it when he heard the conductor say,
"Next stop, Haymarket. Haymarket, next stop."
Well, this is it. Our stop.
We emerged from the subway in a part of town I'd never seen. Above ground, Pickman seemed more or less his old self. He began to share his theories on art.
You know, Thurber, there are things that won't do for Newbury Street. Things that are out of place here and can't be conceived here. It's my business to catch the overtones of the soul. And you really need the old streets for that.
What makes one street better than the last?
Most of Boston isn't anything yet. It's had no time to pick up memories or spirits. I need ghosts, and human ghosts, who have looked on hell and knew the meaning of what they saw. Here in the North End, I can show you houses that have stood for 2 centuries or more. Houses that have witnessed what would make any modern house crumble into powder. In the alleys I have found a place time has not touched.
I'm intrigued. Skeptical, but intrigued.
It's getting dark. Good thing we're nearly there.
More tea, Elliot. No? Anyway, Pickman led us through a maze of narrow alleys. Cars disappeared. Brownstones turned to crumbled gables. Pavement gave way to cobblestones. Streetlights vanished into the ether behind us. Only the moon, filtered through the mist, provided us light. The night was piercing. The chill penetrated my soul.
Ah, here we are.
We rounded the last corner. Before us stood something the likes of which I had never seen. It was like an old silent movie, right down to the gaslights. I stepped aside as a horse-drawn carriage slowly moved by.
This is my special corner of the world. No electricity, no phones, only the vast expanse of humanity, such as it is. You have wondered why I haven't given you a telephone number or an email address. Here they just simply don't exist. Your cell phone won't even get a signal. It probably won't even come on.
That's funny. I charged it this afternoon before we met at the bar. My watch is dead. I just put a new battery in last week. What? How is this possible?
Act of God? If you believe in that sort of thing. Possibly something much more sinister.
Sinister.
Smell the air, Thurber. That's the odor of life and death. People here knew how to live, or know how to live. You know, how to enlarge the bounds of life.
The buildings had a sinister look. I still wondered if this were some elaborate prank perpetrated by Pickman to get the best of me for whatever reason. A few people walked the streets. Their clothing appeared centuries old. Though they stayed mostly in the shadows, they seemed to have a sickening color and almost fish-like look. I thought my mind was deceiving me.
Did you know the whole North End once had a set of tunnels that kept certain people in touch with one another's houses and the burying ground and the sea?
Really?
Some say ancient cultists. In fact, the old ones say, "Let them prosecute and persecute above ground. Things go on every day that can't be reached, and voices laughed at night that can't be placed." Make yourself at home. May I get you a drink? Something a little stronger this time. Some absinthe, maybe?
Thanks.
What shall we drink to now, Thurber?
I don't know.
Ah, I've got it. To my muse, the grotesque.
Okay, sure. Cheers. So, what is this place?
This is my home. It was built in 1709 on the foundation of a home that's even older. The original building was built in 1645. and it was a meeting place for some esoteric order that rebelled against the Puritan presence. It burned in 1700. This house was built on top of the remains.
Interesting. It looks old.
Yes, but we're not here for a history lesson. We're here for art. My art.
Yes. Your art.
I have some of my older works on display in the next room. Come. This is what I refer to as my colonial collection. It's simple, but I say it still speaks volumes.
And speak it did, Elliot. Monstrous volumes. The backgrounds were basic, as he said. Old churchyards, deep woods, cliffs by the sea, brick tunnels. But the madness and monstrosity lay in the figures, seldom completely human. They were all in various stages of feeding. And the colors. How strange. Yellows and greens were all muted. The darker colors, or typically darker colors, the grays, blacks, deeper shades of blue were vibrant.
Ah, look at this one. I have a particular fondness for it. I call it the lesson.
It reminds me of the old myths of creatures stealing human babies and leaving their spawn in the cradles.
Nice. You have a good eye. Notice the parallel between the non-human and human forms. The beasts are often developed from the human.
Morbid, but appropriate for the times, I suppose.
These are mere trifle. Would you like to see my more modern studies? Think you have the stomach for it?
Of course. Lead on.
Let's have another drink first.
All right.
It's smooth, isn't it?
Definitely. Good Lord.
I felt faint, Elliot. I had to grasp the doorway to keep from falling. The other room showed demons of our past, but this room?
Remarkable, isn't it?
I couldn't help but look at those paintings and wonder if anyone would buy them. But that only lasted briefly, as Pickman unveiled a large painting in the center of the room.
This piece I call Subway Accident. Look at the faces, the anguish, the horror.
It was horrific. Flocks of vile things were flowing from a crack in the floor of the subway tunnel. They were attacking people who were fleeing, smoking subway cars. There was a fiendish glee on the creatures' faces.
So horrific.
Are those supposed to be demons?
Perhaps. I'm not sure if they have a name. I've never asked them. Why? Do they scare you?
Certainly not. I've seen grimmer stuff.
Good. Then you must see my studio. Let me grab my lamp. The lights don't work so well down there. We should freshen that drink, don't you think?
Yeah, I guess. Oh. What's that smell? Did you hear that?
What?
Just a second ago. It was a shriek, a wild animal or something.
Maybe it was one of those demons from my paintings. Better follow close unless you're afraid.
We continued on, my host leading the way. It felt as if we were walking down miles of steps. There was something in the air, Elliot. Something I could not define.
These are the remains of the original building. Careful now. Are you alright?
I just slipped, that's all. I may have bruised my shoulder, but I'll be fine.
How about something to soothe the old nerves after that little jolt? Another drink?
Okay.
Yes. The stone steps get quite slippery from the dampness. And these old stone walls, well, they're a bit jagged. Wouldn't want you to get hurt, Thurber. Not yet, anyway. As you can see, my friend...
Wait a minute. What did you mean by that?
What?
When you said not yet anyway, what did you mean by... What do you mean you don't want me to get hurt yet?
No, I didn't say that.
Yes, you did. I just heard you.
Your mind is playing tricks on you, Thurber. You know, maybe you are afraid. Afraid to see where I work. Afraid to see what, until now, has been the great unknown.
I am not afraid.
Really? Good. Then let's continue. First, one more for the road, as they say. Now, as I was saying, these stairs go quite deep. I believe we're on the upper level of the old tunnel system. It's amazing to know that you're so far under the surface, isn't it? To know that there are monstrous things happening above you. And to realize that you could go so much deeper if you chose to. I should warn you, the next room is dark and you would do well to stay near the edge.
The edge. Sure.
Well, what do you think?
I think I found the source of the smell. Oh, I smell the sea and something, I don't know, something else. Is that a pit? Oh,
Yes,
what's down
that's a
there?
pit. I've never tried to climb down. There are stairs on the other side, just out of light's reach, that lead down. But the wood is rotten after 3 centuries of moist air.
It's difficult to make out the other side.
Come, my studio is right through this door. I really should oil these hinges. This is my inner sanctum, as it were.
What the devil was that?
What?
The shrieking just then. What made that noise?
Shrieking? You're insane, Thurber. That was just the wind.
That wasn't the wind, Pickman. Tell me what's down there.
There are a lot of noises down there. That pit and the tunnels beyond connect to any number of gruesome things. A den of wildcats, the sea crashing against the rocky shore, a sightless monster. But enough of that. I want you to see my latest painting. It's still entitled. Please tell me what you think.
Good God, Pickman. What is this supposed to be? What I saw, Elliot, was a colossal, nameless blasphemy with glaring red eyes, holding a man, what was left of him, in his bony claws. It looked so real.
Well, Thurber, do you like it?
I'm not sure what to say about it. I've never seen the actual breath of life so fused into a canvas. That monster is there. It's really there.
I'll take that as a compliment.
Pickman, there is no way you can capture something so horrible from just your imagination.
Yes, you're right. I say ya, riaga, biasha, zielka, aya ketaru, aye ketaru.
What are you doing? Pickman, don't let me go.
Thurber. You're not supposed to talk with your mouth full. I thought you were raised in polite Bostonian society. Surely you haven't forgotten your blue-blooded etiquette.
Let me go, you lunatic!
You know you asked me where I get my inspiration from. The work you've sold and profited from. At least until recently, you remember that old saying about writers, about how they should write about what they know? It's true for painters, too. A painter paints best what he sees. And I mean what he sees in real-life experiences, and that's all I am doing.
Why am I hanging here? What are you doing with me?
See, Thurber, painting is an addiction. When you create art and people rave about it, it gives you a certain rush. A rush that's better than heroin, better than cocaine, and better than absinthe. But one must keep feeding that addiction, Thurber. That's where you come in. To feed my addiction, I've got to feed my inspiration. To do that, I've got to keep feeding those things in that pit. Understand now?
You belong in Arkham.
Come now, Thurber, don't be cross. You've wondered where I get my inspiration. Well, now you get to see and be a part of it. It's just as well. You never really appreciated my vision, did you? You just wanted all the money you could get off poor, macabre Pickman.
It's not true. It's not true.
I know. You were gonna stop pushing my paintings. You thought I was going too far.
Please, Richard. Let me go. I'll sell any painting you want me to. I'll still be your friend. Please.
They must have run short of food. They sound like they're devilishly anxious for more. Let's whet their appetites, shall we? Come now, it couldn't have hurt that much. Believe me, I could have cut you worse than that. I just needed to make a small nick with my knife to arouse them. All they need is just a small scent of blood. It sounds like it worked. I'll go fetch them then, and I'll have all my subjects ready to paint. Stay here and make yourself comfortable. I'll only be a minute. Ever see a classic Colt revolver, Thurber? I recommend them. I carry them whenever I'm inspired to paint. My subjects, the ones in that pit, they aren't always agreeable about posing for me.
I could have at least left a light, Pickman. I have to have a way to get out of here. I can't see. There's a toolbox right over there. If I can swing my legs. Good. Now maybe if I can pick up that screwdriver with my fingers. Pickman! Forget him. Got it. Okay. Where's the door? I can't see a thing. Oh, they're getting closer. Oh, please, God. Please, God, let me get out of here. What was that? What was... Ah! Let me go! Let me go! Please, God, don't let it get me in that pit. Give me something to grab onto. Yes, I got it. That's it. A few more inches. Get me next to it, you freak. Come on, that's it. Okay, I got it. Now, don't miss. Don't miss, Thurber. I'm loose. I'm loose. Okay. Stay close to the wall. Good. Oh, good God. Must be hundreds of them down there. Oh. Where's the door? Damn door! Keep trying! Keep trying to hit me! I'm free! Free! Free, I said! Thank God. Oh, thank God. No, not again. Please, help me! Anyone, please help me! No!
cell phone. Oh, please, God. God, please let the cell phone work. Why won't this cell phone work? Why won't this damned phone work? Help me, please. Somebody help me. The next thing I knew, I was here. I don't know what's become of Pickman, Elliot. I don't like to guess. You might have surmised I had some inside information on him, but I don't. I think you'll understand why I don't tell the police. They would ask me to guide them, but I couldn't go back there. Even if I knew the way. I'm not sure I could find it, or if anyone could.
Excuse me for barging in, Mr. Thurber. Your door was open?
Quite all right. I was just having my usual cup of Portsmouth tea and chatting with my friend here.
What friend?
The one sitting across from me, beside the painting next to my bathroom.
There's no one else in the room, sir.
What do you want? Can't you see I'm busy with company?
Well, sir, one of the patients from the drug rehab ward is running around, threatening the other patients. Did you hear anything in the hall?
Certainly not.
We're asking the patients to evacuate their rooms and gather in the dining room, so we can do a thorough room search. Your friend can come if he wants.
Very well, then. Come along, Elliot. No, leave your tea here.
God, that's a creepy painting.
It's a Pickman. It's called Elliot. That was the model's name. The human in the middle. Look at the colors.
Really, he kind of looks like you. Right this way, sir.
Come along, Elliot.
All right, that was The Art of Pickman. It was produced by Robert Hurst at the Old Father Studios in cooperation with the University of Kansas, and it was actually distributed with permission from Mutt Media LLC and Old Father Studios. So that gives you an idea of what power the theater of the mind can have, what raw data just pumped through your ears can cause your brain to imagine. The monsters in the pit, the atmospheres, the change even from the sounds to when they're in modern day Boston, and all of a sudden they find themselves in this mystical, magical place where electricity doesn't exist, where cell phones and batteries cease to function. It's this place where you can hear the horse-drawn carriage move by, and you can actually see it with your mind's eye. That is the power that theater of the mind has on us. Well, that does it for us this week at It Matters. Listen, watch, use that active part of your brain to really experience the world around us. When we do that, we can have a much fuller experience and enjoy ourselves much more in the world. So stay tuned. At 8 o'clock tonight, we'll be First Cut Live, and we'll be back next week with another show. And as always, remember, if it's important, it matters.